Start the streaming, and in theory we're streaming without dropped frames. I think we're live. We're live streaming at 7 megabit. All right, let's make sure we actually like show up live though.
Okay.
I want to be. All right. Looks like we're working. All right.
Top 5 ways to use your office headset by headsets.com.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by them.
Put it on your dog for...
Okay, so we're going to not read this ad.
Skip the ad.
We're not going to read this ad. We're going to skip the ad and make sure... All right, we're live. We're solid. Hello, everybody. Welcome to WordCast number 57 here. Yeah, we know we're back and we weren't. Just a brief rundown that will take only a moment. There's a lot changing with the channel right now.
Yeah.
I will have a channel update video about it probably later this week to explain the schedule changing and all kinds of other stuff. The content is going to get a lot better around here, both related to the podcast and videos and other articles and other stuff like that on the site. A lot is changing. I'm doing a lot of restructuring, and I'm very excited. So I think the future is looking very bright, but that's why we've been down for a little while. We've been trying to figure things out. But anyway, we've got a lot of interesting topics this week. This is actually a pretty exciting week. And we know we're an hour late. We'll probably go a little bit later than normal.
Just not too much.
Yeah, because he's lazy. So anyway, lots of interesting stuff, though. We've got jam-packed with lots of PC news. Some of that will be quick. And then we're going to be talking, obviously, about the T-Mobile and Sprint mergers. And a lot of other things.
Yep. So yeah, we're going to start with the T-Mobile and Sprint merger just because that's kind of a big deal.
It's a very big deal, and it's pretty much official.
It's official as far as like the companies have agreed to it. That part's done. We don't know if it's going to pass government approval. I'm sure board approval will happen.
I don't imagine government blocking this either. I don't think it's likely.
It depends. The reason that I say that is that
that's not a good reason.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
4 has kind of been the magic number for cell phone carriers as before. The government didn't approve the AT&T and T-Mobile merger.
That's true. They didn't.
I think that there are reasons that you could say this is better. Whether or not you agree with those are another story.
Yeah.
So essentially, realistically it ends up being T-Mobile buying out Sprint more so than an actual merger. It's not like they're going to be called Sprint Mobile or S-Mobile or T-Sprint. It's called T-Mobile. Jean Legier staying CEO.
They're not changing the colors to yellow like some people speculated. I never understood that. This is like it's treated a lot more like a buyout.
Yes. The COO of T-Mobile will also remain the same. The current CEO of Sprint will join the board of T-Mobile, but will not have like a more day-to-day job like he currently does. Now, let's talk about the things that they're claiming will happen and what might happen with this.
Right, and some of our opinions surrounding this.
So Jean Legier is claiming that prices will drop, but won't... I mean, obviously, he doesn't have a specific amount. There's so many factors that go in.
They can't,
One of the things to take into account is that generally when there's mergers of companies that own spectrum, the government requires at least some of that spectrum be given back to the government.
To be sold off again, yeah.
And between T-Mobile and Sprint, because Sprint owns a lot of spectrum.
Yes, they do.
T-Mobile now owns a lot of spectrum. So between those two companies...
especially because Sprint, you have to remember, is CDMA base. That was their original base, right? And so they had spectrum on an end that T-Mobile didn't have.
Yeah. So Sprint's main spectrum for quite a long time was 1900.
Yeah.
They also have, I believe it's 900 or 800 megahertz. And then the newest thing for them of a significant amount was when they bought out Clearwire, which gave them the 2.5 gigahertz.
Yes, exactly. They own a stupid amount of spectrum at this point.
And so the things that T-Mobile is focusing on pertaining to spectrum and the merger, I think they know what they're willing to give up, and it's probably the 1900 megahertz.
Yeah.
1900 megahertz isn't that good. It's not fast, but it's not...
It's not great at building penetration.
But it's not great at building penetration.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a particularly favorable...
Sprint, it wasn't good cell phone service, especially in 3G.
Yes, it's one of the main reasons. Yeah, correct, yeah. And,
And so with this, T-Mobile's been...
Does this mean they're going to own WiMAX spectrum?
Yeah. That's 2.5 gigahertz.
I know. That's interesting.
And they're going to use it, just not under the WiMAX tech.
Yeah, well, of course.
So essentially the focus...
2.5, or 2.5, right?
Yeah, 2.5
has
gigahertz.
a really good... it is actually a good set of spectrum to
Yes.
own for specific purposes.
So the focus from T-Mobile, if you watch their like 7-minute video, that's really not for consumers. It's more so like focused at the agency that has to approve this and the stock owners. It's about why this would be good for the company and the country. And the focus is on the 2.5 gigahertz that Sprint has and the 600 megahertz that T-Mobile now has.
Yep.
Because the thing with 5G is to get the sort of speeds that 5G promises.
Yeah. 5G.
The rollout, I do think that this is a different enough thing to be considered.
Okay, I guess so.
The
The whole G
of-
thing, I know it's just a consumer marketing thing, but it's just
Well, there's two layers to it.
I
There's
mean,
the
yeah.
actual standards body that comes up with the standard.
Correct.
And
Yes.
then
then
is
there's the marketing
the
standpoint.
marketing standpoint.
Yeah.
But no one currently, none of the carriers are talking about 5G in the way they did with 4G. It's not cell phone tower upgrades and that's it.
Yeah.
It's a complete restructuring of how you build out cell phone networks.
And at this point, like, I can easily see this kind of internet, like, being... I can see 5G, the 2.5 gigahertz band, being fast enough to realistically replace a lot of consumer in-home internet.
That is something I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, that could... I'm interested in that.
So, with the way that that 5G is likely going to work is a lot of small cell sites rather than a small amount of large cell sites.
Yes.
So that means, because 2.5 gigahertz and any high frequency band that can allow for a lot of data doesn't have that much range, doesn't have great building penetration, especially at range.
Yeah.
And so you need towers in much higher density in order to get the right amount of coverage, but it's going to give you 10-20 times faster speed.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why, you know, something that's easy, I think, for people to just remember. The higher the frequency, the bigger the number in this case, the more bandwidth, but the less range and less building penetration.
Yeah.
And so that's the easy way to think of it and remember it. This is why Google Fiber is still a thing. We're talking about rolling out neighborhood-based, wasn't it 80 gigahertz? I think it was 80 gigahertz based internet that would be point to point, a tower like in the center of the neighborhood that delivers that tower on your roof, and it has to be line of sight, so there's no obstruction in the way because it can't really go through anything other than the rain it'd probably be fine with. So this is something though that's obviously much lower, so it actually has semi-decent range and it can go through buildings, but like you're saying, there has to be super increased density.
If you look at something like Clearwire, which I had, the problem with why Clearwire wasn't good wasn't their spectrum. It was
why
the fact...
we dropping a bunch of frames?
I do not know.
We're delivering a bunch, but we're dropping a bunch, and my laptop's like dying. Oh, that was weird. Okay, I don't know. Internet cut out for a sec, I guess. I'm so sick of this crap. There, it's probably gonna stick at this low frame rate now too.
Yeah. Oh.
Hopefully the audio is still stable.
Yeah. So Clearwire, its biggest problem was that its tower density was not great because it was, in a lot of areas, it was running on Sprint towers. They just had a separate add-on to it.
Yes.
And so when you're doing that, Sprint doesn't have high density because it wasn't built for 5G. It was built for, at that time, it was 3G.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at low cell site density, which means you're not getting close to the recipient of the service. I had Clearwire for a while. If you didn't have,
I'd forgotten you did. That's right. Yeah.
If you didn't have the, if I didn't have the back door of my apartment open, we couldn't get speeds low enough latency to game. It would simply be I'd open the door and I could play basic games online, like not quick.
Well, right.
FPS,
Yeah, but I mean, you're gonna get a ping that's enough to actually be usable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was kind of crazy how bad that was. So that's the big thing, is the cell service, because the 600 megahertz that T-Mobile has will be excellent, as it already is for things like call quality and whatnot. On top
Pretty
of that,
good speed as well as decent distance and building penetration.
Especially when combined with the other tech from the 600 megahertz.
Yeah.
And so that's very
600
important.
megahertz is an incredible frequency.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that T-Mobile owns it.
And so the other thing that they're talking about is it'll allow for faster 5G rollout, which is true when you have the income of both Sprint and T-Mobile. That gives them a lot more money.
Yep.
The only reason they were able to do the 4G LTE upgrades that they were after Jean took over, as fast as they were was because of the influx of cash from the failed AT&T and T-Mobile deal.
Right.
Part of that contract was if the buyout did not go through, T-Mobile got money and a roaming agreement from AT&T, so they didn't have to pay for roaming.
And then they were able to just push.
Yes, and they could throw. They can't do that as much now. Now they have more money.
Do you think AT&T regrets that decision?
Yes. Oh no.
Oh yeah.
No doubt.
Like, oh, you just added a competitor to the market, basically. Because before that, they were essentially not competitive. In fact, they had such a horrible consumer base. I remember when I switched to them for a couple of years, probably about 2 years after I'd switched, and I told people, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry you're on T-Mobile. And I'm like, I mean, it slaughters your network, but obviously the consumer standpoint was it's terrible. And I switched because the improvements were so drastic, because they were rolling out so much, because they were actually investing their money was part of it, and they actually had the money to invest. And now look where we are.
Yep.
And it's great. So the good factors that could potentially come out of this, though, right, could be, my goodness, I don't know what is going on. My laptop is like, this is weird. It has plenty of power it is. I mean, we're going to have a dedicated streaming PC later, so we'll be fine. But, so the good things that could potentially come out of this, right, is the mergers allowing them to compete better against AT&T and Verizon. Because keep in mind, AT&T and Verizon have enough money, they can push back against T-Mobile, even though T-Mobile is, in my opinion, inarguably the best right now, unless you're talking pure coverage, right? But in terms of performance, in terms of value, in terms of contract basis, even though that's gotten a lot better on the other ones, better, so to speak, right? And so my personal standpoint, and I think this is also like can be backed up factually, is T-Mobile's the best carrier right now. But don't ever assume that means that T-Mobile's winning the race. Verizon and AT&T have so much money they're sitting on, they could push back hard against T-Mobile. It's just a matter of whether or not they think that's going to make them more money in the long run, because that's what matters. So
this deal would put T-Mobile at number 2, not ahead of Verizon, but ahead of AT&T. So that would be a good thing. On top of that, again, it would make the rollout of 5G faster for T-Mobile,
right?
Which is going to be important for their competitiveness in the 5G generation of cell phone service and phones. Because ultimately, if Verizon has a significant 5G rollout way faster than T-Mobile, some people are going to switch, and a lot of people aren't going to switch off of Verizon.
You're right. That's a good point. That's actually,
it solidifies their market stance even more.
Now,
though, and they're claiming lower prices. It could be the case because, think about it. You can eliminate a lot of overhead between the two companies.
Yes.
But by doing this, you can eliminate a lot of the, Sprint has lower prices than T-Mobile already in a lot of cases because they have to compete. But they also have multiple prepaid carriers they have to deal with.
I was about to say that. So what does this mean for the likes of...
T-Mobile could merge Boost and Virgin and all of that.
Boost, Virgin, and Metro PCS.
I think that what they would do is likely have Metro be one for the mid-tier prepaid.
Okay,
like the mid-tier of their cell phones. The Boost Virgin
the
combination
budget.
Be the super budget tier.
Okay.
The Net 10 competitor.
Right.
And then have T-Mobile be the top tier.
Right, okay. I think that makes sense. I think that's likely to happen. I'm not really sure yet if I personally think this merger should go through. Like, it's a weird standpoint because it's like we were mentioning, on one hand, it's like here you have two giant companies merging, and this is something that that generally often isn't good for consumers. Right? It often causes anti-competition issues. Obviously this removes a competitor from the market completely.
Is Sprint really a competitor?
That's a good question. See, and that's another standpoint to get at is Sprint's not good. They've gone downhill.
The only reason you can consider Sprint a competitor when you can't consider like Comcast a competitor, because Comcast has their cell phone offerings now, is that Sprint owns their own towers.
Yes, right.
But the cell phone service isn't. Nobody goes to Sprint because of their cell phone service.
No, it's not. The only reason, I know family members that stay on it, and the only reason is because they can strong arm them into doing anything. They walk into corporate, they're like, "We've been with you for 22 years." We're like, "We'll fucking leave if you don't."
That's slowly changing.
And
because I know the Sprint customer service, the Sprint reps, including managers, have slowly lost certain abilities.
So that they're not able to do much anymore. And so at this point, I mean, I think I want this merger to go through. But it's a really hard standpoint for me to be sure if I want to do that or not, because
I think the most important thing for me as to whether or not I will ultimately want this to happen in advance is if we can get some kind of more detail on the price drop. Because if we get a price drop, even if it's fucking 50% right now, if we get a price drop the day it goes through, but then 6 months later it's more expensive than it is now, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So saying, oh yeah, we'll drop prices, when T-Mobile dropped prices to way below anyone else, but now they're back up to as expensive as they were.
Yeah, they are. And you could still make the argument they're a better value.
Yes.
But they are just as expensive as everybody else. And actually what you could say is they dropped prices, and then the market dropped prices, and then they went back up to where the market is now. So they did help bring market pricing as a whole down.
Yeah.
But it's not like they're any cheaper than anybody else now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although it depends how you define cheaper, right? We're talking just pure dollar amount. We're not obviously talking about value, because I feel like you get a great value with them.
Yeah.
Especially if you got lucky and got onto Jump on Demand like I did.
Or the 2 for $100 plan.
Yes, there was that too. Yes.
I think that another thing that T-Mobile could do, and this is something that is the fault of all carriers, including T-Mobile right now, is, and if they made this type of promise, I think it would go a long way. Stop shafting single line accounts.
I agree. Yeah, it's frustrating because I'm on a single line and it's...
For those that don't know why they do this, to stockholders, multi-line accounts represent something much more significant.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, all these cell phone companies are public. Having multi-line accounts for a lot of different reasons. It's easier to upsell them on services because they're already spending more money, so it's a less percentage, that type of thing. Multi-line accounts are generally preferred. That's why I believe, now this is not me saying this as as a former employee, this is me saying this as just like, this is my thought process on this situation. There's nothing confirmed. But I'm pretty sure that the reason Sprint gave away free tablets and had like $5 data plans for such a long time was to up their multi-account.
It wouldn't surprise me if that was like pretty much purely the reason.
Yeah.
We do have a question in here though that's regarding not this merger but a different merger. Somebody asks, when is Google gonna buy AMD?
They're not.
They're never going to.
Google would make their own chips and then probably put AMD out of business.
Well, I don't know about put AMD out of business, but because they're going to get into a different market. But
for now,
well, what would happen? So it's highly likely Google could easily design their own chips. Building a fab would be expensive even for Google. So in that case, what they're going to do is partner with TSMC or Global Foundries
or buy Intel.
Or even then, that would be an expensive venture as well. It'd be hilarious, but no, I don't think Google's going to buy AMD. I think it's a lot more likely that Google does design their own chips for phones specifically and other mobile devices, eventually laptops, or Chromebooks or Chromebook tablets, as that whole crappy thing was. But I think it's likely that they partner with TSMC or Global Foundries to get that stuff built. Probably not Intel or anybody like that. Probably TSMC or Global Foundries. That's a possibility. Or, also AMD has a really good experience building custom SoCs, and so they could hire them to design a chip for them. I'm curious though, why do you want somebody to buy AMD? He says, I want somebody to buy AMD. I don't see the reasoning behind that. I could understand that when they were really, really, really struggling money-wise, somebody to help revive them, but I don't see a reason for them to be bought right now because they're doing really good financially. Their quarterlies are better than they've been in a very long time. They've had huge rises year over year.
Probably because they can't keep an employee.
I mean, in terms of Intel stealing their employees, that's...
We'll talk about that because I have a bit of a difference. Not necessarily. It depends on if things come out. But I think that there could be a more valid reason that I won't fault employees for leaving for other than, money.
Right. Okay. And so I guess we'll get to that. So we're going to move on to our next set of topics now, though, which is at the top here of our doc. You're cool with going to that?
Probably? Yeah, the AMD stuff.
Well, we'll start with the Intel stuff.
Oh.
Is that...
Well, I just thought you wanted to go 7 nanometer.
Say again?
I thought you were wanting to go 7.
Well, I want to talk about 10 nanometer before we talk about 7 nanometer. That's why.
Make sure and point out that they're slightly different.
Yes, I will. So Intel once again delayed their 10... Ruru2 responded again, because AMD is fighting two massive companies with so little. And while I agree with you, that's true, And again, I think before Zen released and started doing so well, the Zen architecture, I would say it'd be a good thing for AMD to be bought out so that they could compete better. But now they're at a point where they're pulling back a lot of the consumer market. We actually will be talking about that a little bit later with the Steam survey statistics. But also, they're at a point where they're actually semi-competitive now, and they're actually really competitive now, and they're pulling in money. And then I believe their EPYC chips are going to start being really competitive in the server market. That just takes a lot more time to scale up. This is also why we won't be seeing any new EPYC CPUs this year. We'll be seeing some next year. Lisa Su talked about that. And that's just because the server market's slow. There's no point in them releasing something new right now. Their stuff's still slowly being adopted. But I do think AMD has a really good fighting chance right now. So right now, I don't think that I want somebody to purchase them. What I do want, though, is for them to continue to push as hard as they are and continue to take some of their design architectures to the next level in terms of applying it to GPUs, things like their multi-chip modules, like the CCXs, the core complexes that are in the Zen architecture, I think could really be applied to GPUs, which they've talked about being applied to GPUs. That could make drastic improvements in things. Although TSMC recently announced something that we'll talk about a little bit later related to that exact thing in terms of multi-chip modules. But getting into Intel delaying 10 nanometer again, so this is absolutely hilarious to me. Specifically because Intel has delayed 10 nanometer 6 times now. We have so many Lake-named processor series, architecture series, that are basically the same dang thing, just with some very minor refinements, and mostly it's just releasing more chips to the market. And they're stuck at 14 nanometer. And I just find it funny because I feel like Intel is just... Like, nobody can believe them anymore. If I were an investor and if I were allowed to invest in the market, Intel would be the last place I'd look to because they essentially keep lying about when they're going to roll this out. If you think it's going to happen in, let's say it's 2015, and you think it's going to happen in 2017, say 2019. Give it a couple of extra years because you should know as an experienced experienced fab, you should understand things always take longer than projected. They always do. In any kind of new lithography tech, it takes longer than expected to make it actually function appropriately and get good yields. Mm-hmm. There's going to be issues, and you should understand that. That's how it always is, and that's how it is with any project on any scale, even as small as down to like us. When I'm like going to be doing something on my computer, it's like, oh, I'm going to be doing new custom cables. Oh, it'll take me 3 weeks to get it done, and 6 months later, I'm not done, right?
Yeah.
Now, Intel officially is saying 2019 is when it'll come out instead of Q3 2018 like they promised this year. So they have officially delayed it. They claim they're shipping small volumes right now, but they won't say to whom. So I have no idea where these small volumes are going, if they're going out for testing with other companies, if they're going to like Dell and stuff to actually get tested by them, or some who knows? Who knows what they mean by shipping small volumes? They're having really bad yields is the problem.
Shipping is generally considered to be like, especially in the form of an earnings call, a selling them thing, not a for testing thing. That comes across to me as like they have maybe like a specific like a very important partner that wanted to buy new chips that they were like, we will give you whatever we can make.
It wouldn't surprise me if... So we've talked about Apple making custom chips, right? It wouldn't surprise me if the last run of Intel-based Apple PCs, or Apple Macs, whatever, are Intel 10 nanometer based, and then they move on to their own stuff.
They're gonna be Kaby Lake G.
Okay, that's it. But
Kaby Lake G is the most
Kaby Lake G
product
is the most Apple product
made.
ever. But if they come out with let's say Cascade Lake G, right, or whatever, something based on 10 nanometer but running the Vega architecture still.
So if that was shipping, I think we'd hear rumors of that.
That's probably true, though. That's probably true. We hear rumors because that's a lot of design
standpoint. This is going to
standpoint.
someone that's got no reason to talk about it because they just wanted the chip.
That's a good point. That's a good point, too. So what's going to be happening, though? Yeah, we're going to be getting Whiskey Lake and Cascade Lake later this year. Those are not 10 nanometer. Those are still 14 nanometer based. So too many lakes at this point. And it's really hard to understand the order of it. And that's what's frustrating me, is Intel, even though they officially got rid of TikTok, and then they officially got rid of POW, their two versions of die shrinking and architecture changes, right? They still are going by the naming scheme of TikTok. So the lake is still there because the die hasn't shrunk. And that's really frustrating.
So it's tick tock 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 tock.
Yeah, correct. And then of course, I don't know. Intel, your naming department has issues because we have we have your Xeon series where we have literally two completely different series that are labeled gold, even though the tiering goes from bronze to platinum. You put 2 tiers of gold. No sense there.
Yeah.
We have. Don't forget about their Nux that were called the Baby Canyon Nux. Like, who thought it was a good idea to call them Baby Canyon?
Bro.
It's just, oh my goodness. So anyway, so the issue here, though, that Intel is claiming is the transistor density is so high that they're having, I can't remember the proper term, but basically power leakage between the transistors. And so it's problematic, and they're having issues with it. Now, something interesting to note, though, is they already are working on their EUV technology, their extreme ultraviolet lithography, for their 7-nanometer chips that they have plans for. We'll get into more about 7-nanometer here soon. But 10-nanometer has been delayed so much. We've actually been stuck at 14-nanometer since 2014. So when is 7-nanometer going to actually happen?
Well, I think what it is, UEV, from my understanding, is... I wouldn't say easier, but it's going to be something they expect to be easier to implement, maybe.
Maybe so. We'll see. I mean, EUV technology is great, and DUV, deep ultraviolet, is still being used to manufacture the 10-nanometer. So this is new tech, and this is tech that also Global Foundries, TSMC, and Samsung, as far as I understand, all three are working on it. I do want to respond to Rurutu's comments, though. He made 2 really interesting comments here. I like this, actually. Yeah, so 3. So we have he's like, what'll please Intel fanboys if Intel will solder their chips instead of using garbage thermal interface material. I agree with that. I don't understand why they don't do that on their higher end chips. Their only reason to do that is to save a little bit of money, and that should only matter on, in my opinion, sub $150 chips. So there's no reason that their high end chips shouldn't be soldered, and it's a little bit frustrating to me that they don't do that, because even though I love AMD and want to support them, Intel could be much more competitive in the market if they would just frickin' use solder, but they won't do it, and that's really frustrating and irritating to pretty much all of us. And then he also mentioned Cascade Lake is their new X series, isn't it? It won't have the Vega chips. I was just using that as an example. Cascade Lake isn't going to be 10 nanometers, so I was just throwing out an example of what they could call it, like in terms of they'll call it something like G, right? But maybe, who knows? And then he also said Ice Lake and Tiger Lake are still 10 nanometer. I believe they're still planning to do that. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. I would assume that they would finally maybe change away from the lake once they do another die shrink, but they've kind of said they're not going to, so I don't know. It's to the point where I'm just sick of Intel's naming schemes, and at this point, it is easier to identify Intel chips by their product number than it is by their series, and that's frustrating in a lot of ways. I mean, it's easier to say like the 8000 series than it is to say Cabby Lake, right? Or Coffee Lake or whatever. I don't even know which one it is because it's hard to keep track at this point. It's really frustrating.
Okay.
Okay, so here we'll go ahead and jump into the 7-nanometer stuff. We can get back to the other Intel news in a moment. That'll be pretty quick. So meanwhile, we have AMD over here confirming by Lisa Su that Zen 2 7-nanometer is going to be a thing. Now, of course, this is 7-nanometer as far as we understand it with FinFET technology, so it's not exactly the same as Intel's 7 or 10 nanometer. They have plans for it. It's a little bit different. I don't fully understand the differences between FinFETs and non-FinFETs. It's very complicated, and I'm attempting to read into that more so that I can be more informed on that. But it's not something that's super simple to just grasp. But anyway, here, I'll actually read Lisa Su's statement here. And this is from Guru 3D. They're the ones that I'm reading this from. But this is a statement from Lisa Su. So she said, quote, "So our founder strategy is to use both TSMC and Global Foundries on the first 7-nanometer product. We are using TSMC for that product, and we have a very strong relationship with them. And so, we do see a good momentum on it from what we see, and I'm not concerned about capacity." Sometimes Lisa Su's quotes are a little hard to understand, I'll be honest. But anyway, so hopefully that made sense to you guys, but here's the rest of it. So all of the sales this year will be around the current generation of Ryzen, and so that gets us to the mid-single-digit share. 7-nanometer Zen 2 based product will ship later this year. to customers, and that will be in production in 2019. And we do believe that the adoption rate of the second generation could potentially be higher than the adoption rate of the first generation. Little interjection here. Keep in mind she's talking Zen as the architecture, so she's talking Zen versus Zen 2, not Ryzen versus Ryzen 2. We already know Ryzen 2's out. I just want to note that to anybody that's paying attention. This is the second generation of the Zen architecture. Ryzen 2 is running the Zen Plus, a refinement of the 14 nanometer Zen architecture. It's now 12 nanometer on Zen Plus. So anyway, continuing, mostly because customers will be more familiar with our systems and our products. And so we'll see how it goes, but we certainly... Our overall goals are ambitious in the server space. And so this year, it's first generation Ryzen. Next year, we'll mix in the 7 nanometer second generation. I think she means Zen. She corrects herself. I'm sorry, first generation EPYC. And next year, we'll mix in the second generation of the EPYC products. So she's specifically stating that server's not going to get the same refresh cycle that the consumer-based stuff is getting. Mm-hmm. And I can actually appreciate that from a PC and server builder standpoint. It's annoying that Intel oftentimes attempts to sync up their product releases across all the platforms. Now, they don't do it at the same time, but I mean, every time you do a product refresh on the mainstream doesn't mean, or on the mobile, doesn't mean you have to do it in every other area. Every time they refresh or release a new series for desktops, for example, doesn't mean they need to do the same thing to server chips when it's fine.
But they can get new sales. Right. And so that was the whole rebranding the Xeon series, was let's pull in sales as best as we possibly can. So anyway. So 7 nanometer is looking to be really interesting, though. Like I said, they'll be using both TSMC and Global Foundries for 7 nanometer. So I do want to again emphasize to people this isn't exactly the same as Intel, so this doesn't mean that TSMC and Global Foundries are necessarily way ahead of Intel or anything like that, but it is big news. Now, I do want to add in something here, too, that I read today that I actually didn't put in the doc. I didn't have time. But TSMC, according to, I can't remember if it was an official statement or rumors, but has come across a pretty revolutionary technology where they're going to be able to actually stack dies, just like you have stacked memory in like HBM as well as like 3D NAND for SSDs, being able to stack GPU and potentially CPU dies. And they would function very similarly to how AMD's Infinity Fabric works with their multi-chip modules and their core complexes, where they have a communication between them. But this would be much lower latency and much quicker because they're stacked dies. There's physically less space between them. They would essentially function as a singular chip. And the issues behind this, of course, though, would be they'd have to use some kind of process node that they have really good yields on already, because they actually would have to do photolitho to 2 of the silicon wafers simultaneously. And so if one of those chips failed on either side of the silicon wafer, it renders the other one completely useless. And so what's interesting about this, though, is we're going to have heat and power issues, potentially specifically power issues, where we're going to have imagine like 2 1080 Ti's in one card that doesn't take up any more space, but then you're going to be producing twice as much heat and you're going to be producing twice as much power usage. So I mean, we could potentially see graphics cards with this tech with 4 8-pin power connectors again, or really small,
or really but of course, it would just depend what they're doing in terms of what they're actually stacking to make this work. But what a lot of this tells to me personally, what a lot of the stuff that's been coming out of the different foundries as well as the different architecture standpoints from different companies, is AMD did something pretty special here when they came out with the Zen architecture with Infinity Fabric. Mm-hmm. Because NVIDIA, Intel, who's looking into the stacking thing very similarly, TSMC, they're all looking into ways of connecting multiple dies together to function as a singular unit. And that's what AMD's done a very good job at, and it's scaled really well for them. And if we can get this done on things like GPUs, which are already particularly parallelized, I mean, this is a really good, really interesting thing, I think, personally. Yeah. It's very exciting.
Yeah, the wafer-on-wafer tech is a big deal.
Amazing, honestly. It's a very big deal. Ruru2 mentioned stacked GPU. How will they handle the heat? I think that'd be a hard question. It would depend. I do think some of the really beefy aftermarket coolers on, like, say, a 1080 Ti would be capable of cooling 2 of them at the same time, albeit not at low RPMs or particularly quiet, but it would be doable. The other thing is maybe massive, like, quad slot cards and stuff, right? But I mean, if you're going to take up 2 slots per GPU or per graphics card for 2 separate graphics cards, what's the difference of taking up 4 slots? for one graphics card. Of course, unless you're trying to manage your PCI Express area so that you can maximize how many devices you can have plugged in at a time. And he also mentioned that servers need more validation and quality control when we're talking about Epic. Yeah, exactly, and that's why they, of course.
Yeah, and think about this for future generations of cards. What if, they release a card, as we go on, reducing nanometers is going to get harder.
Yeah,
so
it's going to get to the point of literally impossible.
Yeah, so what if for now we get first gen card on the new die size?
Yeah.
The refresh with the refinement and the better yields, and then the die stacked version.
Yeah, exactly, and that'd be a really good area to progress into. It gives them more time to develop other things
rather than AMD going 480, 580, 680.
Just all the same stuff. Yeah, right, exactly. It would give them another aspect of something they could upgrade. And now I will give AMD credit in terms of, and this isn't speaking towards NVIDIA in specific, this is speaking towards Intel in specific, actually. But in terms of, at least, AMD does refresh their stuff, but at least they don't attempt to push out what they're calling a new architecture when it's the same damn thing. At least they refresh the cards, but it's still called Polaris or still called, the Hawaii architecture. You know what I mean? Whereas Intel's like, here's a new architecture, and it's like, it's exactly the same. You didn't do anything, but you're calling it something new to trick people into purchasing it. So we can appreciate that, even though they do refresh very frequently, and it's very obvious when they do, but also a refinement, refreshment, I'm generally okay with, depending on how it's done. But yeah, and he also mentioned something interesting here. Yeah, Infinity Fabric was a big win coming out of AMD, and I agree. Yeah. And he's saying it's the big win coming out of AMD, not the Zen cores. And I would say Zen cores are also a big win, but I would say Infinity Fabric as a technology for the industry and the idea behind linking multiple physical dies, which they do on Threadripper, or core complexes in the terms of the singular die systems, is really, really, really impressive. So, and he's also saying after 5 nanometer or smaller physics, physics will limit us to the point where, 5 nanometers probably the realistic limit. Maybe 3 nanometer.
No,
has been a little
just
talk.
Ignore physics.
Yeah, just ignore physics. We don't care about it. So, I know IBM, we've talked about before, claims that they have 5 nanometer working, but of course we haven't really seen anything come out of that.
IBM also doesn't really release for consumers.
I mean, IBM also doesn't really... They just sit on cash and don't do anything in terms of releasing product.
It seems like they just have fun.
It seems like they just do whatever the heck they want. I don't actually understand IBM's standpoint. They do server-based stuff, but they're just talked about so little, I think people forget that they're still enormous.
No, this 5 nanometer is for their clocks.
Right, exactly.
Because a lot of schools still have IBM clocks.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I mean, IBM, people think, that old PC company, and they're maybe not a PC company anymore, but they are not old. They are very cutting edge still.
But...
Well, I mean, they're the ones also developing the tape drives of 300 terabytes of tape drive. Yeah. It's like, and they just come out with the stuff where it's just like, what? It's like, we have 5 nanometer working. Yeah. We have 300 terabyte tape drives. Whatever, Oh, man. Yeah. Okay, so let's see here, though. We have more topics. So I wanted to mention something very quickly about Intel. Optane. I'm mad at you, Intel, because...
You released a better product.
So the Intel Optane 900p was a great SSD. I own one. I own the 280 gigabyte model. Let me tell you, it was very fun being able to literally say I have the fastest consumer SSD on the planet. And of course, the 480 gigabyte performed identically to the 280 gigabyte. There is no discrepancy there. Whereas, with NAND-based SSDs, the more flash you get, the faster the speeds or the speed potential, depending on the controller. But yeah, so then they released the Optane 905p. Or 905p, or however you want to say it.
You are really bad at buying hardware.
I know. I bought this laptop, and then they released the 1050 Ti version with the 6-core. And then I buy the Optane and they come out with this. Although I'm actually still satisfied with my Optane purchase, and I'll explain why. But anyway, they okay. So let's just get into the specs. So they have up to they're slightly faster. They have up to 960 gigabytes available for the PCIe and 480 gigabytes for the U.2 version. So that's double what they previously offered. The rated random reads went from 550k IOPS to 575k IOPS, and the rated writes went from 500k to 550k. And then the sequentials went up a little bit. We're talking like 200 megabytes per second. I I can't say I have the fastest anymore. It is faster, and a lot of that is likely controller based. I didn't read through the entire review yet. I'm going to, but a lot of that is likely just controller improvements, because the limits on Optane currently were shown to be likely the controller having issues dealing with something that's so fast because they were using a recycled controller, and so making modifications to the controller can get more speed and lower latency out of Optane. Now, of course, this doesn't come with Star Citizen, which
it's new.
Okay, it's new.
900p didn't come.
No,
with
900p when it at launch. Yes, the reviewers talked about it too, and they were like, apparently it comes with Star Citizen. It was kind of a weird.
It was probably
partnership.
to get Intel to get people to talk about it more.
Well, it was partially that. It was also really suitable that they released it with literally the fastest ship in the game, because it's the fastest SSD on the planet. It was very great. And speaking of which, it's a $200 ship that you can't actually go purchase yourself, but the value is $200. Yeah. And I mean, we're talking 200 like real US dollars, not 200 like in-game currency crap. This is Star Citizen, right? So I love that ship. I love using that ship. I love playing that game specifically with that ship, even though I can't carry cargo, so I can't do some of the missions, because it's just like people start attacking me and I'm just gone. Just bloody gone. It's great. I mean, basically, that's what that ship's for. It's actually a great stealth fighter and a great fighter in general. Cool. It's just, yeah. But anyway, so it's fitting that they did that, and they didn't do that this time, which is somewhat unfortunate. Also, Ruru2 asks, can you raid Optane? Yes and no. So from my understanding, you can raid Optane drives, but it's mostly going to be a software-based raid. There's no hardware-based raid for it, except I think if you use the M.2 800Ps, which are only 2 PCIe lanes, they're not as fast, but I believe you can raid those in the technologies on the extreme-based platforms like Intel's virtual raid on CPU that's garbage because you have to pay for stuff, or Threadripper's NVMe raid. I believe you can. Don't quote me directly on that, but I know there's been some testing on it, and obviously it's insane in terms of like if you do software-based raid and stuff, the sequentials are insane and the IOPS are insane. But the biggest thing with Optane that makes it so different and so revolutionary isn't its random reads and random writes or sequential reads and sequential writes. It's its response time being close to 10 times lower than your modern fast SSD, and even still approaching like 3 to 4 times faster response time than Samsung's Z-NAND that they're coming out with. It's incredibly fast, and this is why actual system responsiveness is so fast on that. My system does boot quicker. Applications do load faster, and in particular, loading up a ton of applications simultaneously, they all load at the same speed that they would have loaded at individually on another SSD, all at the same time though, simultaneously. And so the response time is the important thing, and RAID, especially software RAID, will throw off that response time, treating it as a drive overall. And then you couldn't also boot from it doing proper software RAID. So anyway, point is though, I think a single drive is the most sensible thing here, because if you're looking for maximum sequentials or IOPS, you could just raid a couple of 970 Pros, and there you go, you've got better speeds in that sense. So Optane's awesome, though. The experience of using it has been incredible. On boot up, that thing can push my 16-core 1950X to 100%, loading all applications because it's so quick. It's just absolutely incredible. So let's see here. A little more AMD news that we'll run through really quick. So there was a report going around for a while, and you guys may already know about this. It's a little bit of an older story, but AMD was voiding the warranty, or claiming that your warranty was voided if you used the non-stock cooler that comes in the box. Now, these are only for their processor-in-a-box models, meaning the ones that come with coolers, which is most of them. Obviously, like Threadripper wasn't part of this. It doesn't come with a cooler. Now, AMD was called out on this, saying, hey, guys, why is putting a different cooler on it void the warranty? And it literally said that in the word. I don't remember the word from word exactly what it said, but it was literally saying using a different cooler voids your warranty. AMD basically said, whoops, that was an old thing, and it wasn't ever meant to be that way either. The idea behind it was, if your cooler isn't one that's deemed powerful enough, meaning like, say you're attaching, a 60-watt TDP rated cooler onto a 150-watt TDP rated CPU, that voids your warranty when you kill your CPU because it's getting too hot because of it, although that's still unlikely to happen. Because, of course, there's no proper way, though, for AMD to really even tell if you were using a different cooler. The idea was more so just something that they could use in a legal battle if necessary. Yeah. And it has since been completely changed, so it's totally fine now.
Now it just specifies if it was the cooler's fault.
Yeah. Basically, if your cooler wasn't good enough for the chip, which is your fault, that can void your warranty. But again, them being able to tell that is extremely unlikely. And
Which sucks that they have this policy then, because it's like it's only going to affect the people that tell the truth.
yeah, that's true. That is a true point. Although, yeah, because if they ask what cooler were you using and you say this one, and it's like that's not one that's good enough for this.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
lie to AMD.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It encourages people to lie, which is frustrating. Although my experience dealing with several RMAs, oftentimes they don't ask you questions about it. You just tell them what's wrong with the product, and they go, okay, we'll RMA it.
That means that only really open and honest people are going to get screwed by this.
Yeah, basically. And
So,
it's kind of
lie
lame.
to AMD.
But, yeah. It's just not... It's not a huge deal. It's really nothing for people to worry about.
Use an
overall.
Intel stock cooler on Threadripper.
Yeah, well, I mean, that actually, did you read the comment, or you just come up with that?
I just
Because
came
Ruru2 literally said, don't use Intel stock coolers on AMD products, and then he just said, don't use it on Threadripper.
I completely didn't see that. I don't
That
have
is
the Twitch
excellent.
channel.
That was great. Yeah, you don't even have Twitch open. That was excellent. Oh, man,
Yeah.
that was great. Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, my Noctua NHU14S TR4 edition can struggle at times keeping Threadripper under wraps when it's under any kind of intense load. And I mean, I have mine overclocked to 3.9 gigahertz on all cores, but it's just like the amount of heat that thing expels into the room when I'm gaming and rendering at the same time is absolutely stupid how hot it gets over in my little corner where my system is. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I will have a system update video coming for you guys soon, by the way, anybody that follows the
Yeah.
channel over on YouTube. So let's see. AMD GPU and CPU market share, according to Steam surveys, in April 2018, are looking really up. Now, I don't know if you read into this much.
No.
It's exciting, though, to see AMD making a comeback in a lot of ways. Now, one aspect that confuses me, so we'll get to that in a second. So CPUs have increased 4.6% in the last month, or 6.9% in the last 2 months, according to the Steam hardware survey. Basically meaning gamers are buying more, AMD-based CPUs, which makes a lot of sense because either the APUs, those are really, really good because they're an incredible value for gaming, but also... the CPU Zen is awesome, especially if you're like a streamer or a content creator. Being able to get 8 cores on a budget is absolutely incredible and just amazing. And we can see in all kinds of testing that's done by like Gamers Nexus, for example, doing streaming and playing at the same time. Intel has a lot more trouble with it, even with their 6-core 8700K overclock, than AMD does with their 8-core chips. It's absolutely impressive. So that one doesn't surprise me. That really should surprise nobody. Of course, AMD is taking back CPU market share. Their CPUs are very impressive and are very competitive in lots of different aspects, maybe not single core performance, but a lot of different aspects. And obviously it's a new thing, so of course people are buying them. But what surprised me is GPU market share increased pretty drastically. So it went from...
Did it, though?
I did. This is drastic. I think this is drastic for a month.
Yeah.
I mean, so going from 10.8% to 14.9%, so 4% increase in 1 month, in 30 days. Market share is impressive.
That's like a 50% increase.
Huh?
That's more of like a 50%.
Okay,
increase.
sorry. Yeah, that's true. Like a 50% increase in market share is very impressive. That
I
looks
think
really
it's
good.
just the death of mining. People are now going back to using their cards for gaming.
I think
And
there's some
cards
truth
are
to that.
available for
Yes,
gaming.
and cards are actually available to purchase now. Like you can get an RX 580 at a semi-normal, at a pretty dang normal price.
If you're anyone who's looking to buy a card right now, used market.
Yeah.
AMD cards are cheap. I think that's a big factor.
Yeah,
like
I think so too.
People that weren't gaming on, like if they weren't choosing to game on their AMD cards, so now that they are again, Steam market share showing
should
that.
go up. Yes.
And it, without even getting sales, I think that they could see 1 or 2% of the 4% difference being from just people that weren't gaming, so that they could mine more often.
Yeah,
to gain
right, yes, and that's true too, and that makes sense. But also remember, this isn't just percentage of people that use Steam. This is percentage of people that like have a Steam account, meaning there.
But you have to do the survey, which if you don't use Steam,
okay, and that's true. So if you
don't
bought
log
one and you
month,
don't log in, yeah, right. Okay, so that's a good point. So we should see it going up some just from that.
Yeah.
But also, I think it does indicate sales.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting to me here is you still can't get Vega at a normal price,
Nope.
which is unfortunate. Now, of course, Vega was purchased drastically by the miners for sensible reasons, but you still can't get Vega for under about $800.
Yeah.
Maybe 700. It's absolutely insane. I'm hoping it comes down in price enough that I can purchase one, but we'll see what the market does, I guess. Ruru2 asked, so he's asking about Threadripper. If I understand your question correctly, you're asking about what kind of like wattage power consumption wise at 32 threads at 3.9 gigahertz I'm getting. Kind of ridiculous. So I can actually monitor my power consumption because I have a HX1200i, and so using the Corsair Link software, I can monitor what's been proven by multiple power supply reviewers to be fairly accurate. I can monitor the power supply usage, and my entire system with just the CPU under a Cinebench load, not a Prime 95 load, because that pushes the temperatures way beyond realism. I don't generally test with that for more than a minute or two. But in terms of just running Cinebench, which pushes the CPU pretty intensely, that right there, my entire system consumes about 450 watts. Now, my system at idle, I think is about 120 watts, maybe a little more than that. So, maybe Threadripper's not pulling quite 350, but it's definitely pulling a lot of wattage. It's pretty ridiculous. Now, I got pretty lucky with my chip. I'm only running, it's 1.22 volts, I believe is what I'm pushing through it right now, which is pretty low for that overclock. I wasn't quite able to, I tried to get 4.1 stable, but temperatures were getting too high, even at the voltage that I was at, and it needed more voltage to be stable. But overall, I mean, that thing does consume an insane amount of power. Now, to give you an idea of my system, I'll do a really quick spec rundown. I have 4 hard drives. I have 4 SSDs, one of which is Optane and another one which is M.2. They consume a little more power. I have an RX 580, a sound card, and I have 64 gigabytes, so 4 DIMM slots of 3200 megahertz RAM, as well as a ASRock motherboard. So pretty high idle power consumption, I'd say. I also have 6 fans in there. So idle power consumption isn't like minimal by any means on this system, but still pretty insane power consumption with just Threadripper under load. And I'm going to be doing some testing in the future to see what it's like having everything under a heavy load in that system. Okay, so yeah, so the GPU market share increased, though. That's awesome. So really quick, another SSD story. The 970 EVO and 970 Pro from Samsung are out. They're both M.2 NVMe based SSDs. They're a little bit faster on pretty much every front. Pricing isn't... we'll see what pricing actually does in the market. I'm not even going to list the MSRPs because SSDs fluctuate so much, especially they usually are quite a bit lower than the MSRPs. But basically the competition from places like Western Digital, or SanDisk in that case, was getting really close to the 960 Pro and Evo, and so Samsung kind of had to do something to stay on top of the market because there was the WD Western Digital Black NVMe or whatever. It was a really weird product name because it was the NVMe edition of their M.2 already Western Digital Black based SSD. This one here was really, really, really fast. It was really giving Intel or Samsung a run for their money in a lot of directions. And so, I mean, Samsung had to do something because they've been the top of the SSD market for, 7 years now?
Yeah.
Other than, obviously, Optane having faster response time, but in terms of raw throughput.
Yeah. The Crucial MX500 was announced. It's...
announced in M.2 form factor.
Yeah. So it's just a normal SATA M.2. It's not NVMe or anything special like that, but it performs about the same. It's just a different form factor.
Which is nice. I mean, it's a small form factor, and I appreciate seeing that because the MX500 is a really well-priced SSD.
Yeah. And we're starting to see, I mean, we see more and more cases without hard drive slots and with less SSD slots.
Yeah.
And so this is great for that. If you can get like a cheapish 1 terabyte, throw it in there for cheap, you're good. Yeah,
exactly. And even in situations where if we can start getting like 2 M.2 ports on an ITX board, imagine how tiny of a build you could make, right? Because you don't need any hard drive space at all either. You have like a 1 terabyte for games and like a 500 gig for boot. Good to go. So this is a fun announcement.
Rip Go.
Kaby Lake X is finally dying.
Or IP.
Yeah,
Rest in all the pieces I want to shatter you in.
Yeah, basically. So this horrible product that was out from Intel for absolutely no reason and pissed everybody in the entire market off from every direction has officially been announced. It's going to be getting end-of-lifed in, May 31st, 2019, which is a pretty quick end-of-life for a product. But that's probably because they sold almost 0 of these. They were trash. The 7640X and 7740X were the 2 chips that were out there. They were 4-core chips on the Extreme platform. They still only had their 16 lanes of PCI Express, meaning they were super limiting. Literally, by going with these chips, you got a reduction in what you were getting for your money. You had to buy a more expensive motherboard, and a more expensive CPU, but you didn't get the integrated GPU. And it's not like they were soldered or anything, so they were better at overclocking out of the box. You still had to delid them if you wanted to get a really good overclock on them. So you lost the ability. You literally lost a product. Yeah, exactly. And so it was just a dumb move from Intel that didn't really make sense. Now, the likelihood is maybe they had some stuff from their server lineup that didn't pass in terms of being 8-core chips. They only passed as quad-core chips. Only 4 of the cores were working, or something like that. And then maybe they also didn't pass for certain certifications for servers, right? And so they released them this way. I don't know. Yeah. But I strongly believe that if that was the case, when the entire market exploded and yelled at Intel, they would have said so. They would have been like, well, we just did this because we have these. And so you can buy it if you want or not. And if that's the case, Intel should have sold them for cheap. Because a cheap quad-core on that platform, really cheap, would have made a little bit of sense, even though it'd be dumb.
Even if the cost just made it neutral with the other platform.
Yeah, exactly. Even if the CPUs were cheaper than the mainstream enough to make it so that the higher cost motherboards matched up in price.
Neutral,
yeah, then it was at that point, okay, you're losing a GPU for the same price, but you do have more expandability on the platform for the future if you get a new CPU, and, stuff like that. Yeah, but whatever. I'm glad it's dying. So, moving on. Let's see here. Oh yeah, also Ruruchu mentioned the RX 480 8GB. Looks like it's being sold for about $220 to $290 plus $20 shipping. So yeah, people are paying too much for used cards. Yeah, I'm sure that's gonna come down in price soon because the market's going to start really flooding, but some people are probably keeping them to see what happens.
Also, a lot of people that are trying to jump in on the mining thing don't know how much cards are worth.
That's true. That's a good point too, and so they can still sell them for more and gouge people. Okay, so Vega 20 rumors. So we currently have Vega 10. Vega 10 exists. Vega 20 as an architecture, there's rumors going around about this. These are rumors. I believe they were provided by WCCF Tech and I think video cards. So, yeah. So anyway, it's these are pretty interesting. So these quick rumors, basically, it's going to be potentially 7 nanometer. They have it in-house working according to the rumors, and Lisa Su's kind of confirmed that they have 7 nanometer working, right? So they actually have working products that they can test, though, which is pretty great. So they're just doing validation and stuff is what the rumors are stating here. Mostly it should be for machine learning and AI, so we might not even see Vega 20 come out in the consumer end. So that's a thing. You should stop typing in the doc because I'm reading your typing instead of reading what I'm supposed to be reading.
I'm messing with it right now.
Yeah. So anyway, so there was some points leaked, though. 3D Mark leaked for Vega 20, and the points were 18,794 points at 1,000 megahertz, which, keep in mind, is very similar to Vega 64's 19,963 points, a little bit lower, except that was Vega clocked at 1750 megahertz. So we're talking 750 megahertz dropped off and getting a score that is only about 1,000 points less. That's very impressive. That's about 70% faster per clock. I hope this maybe comes to desktop and actually comes to consumer, because Vega as an architectural standpoint is good. They just need to be able to get it out there to actually function good with games, not consume so much power, meaning not clock it so high, because Vega's clocked too high to compete right now. But if they can get Vega to compete at lower
7
clocks,
gigahertz Vega.
Ah, man. I mean, it's ridiculous.
That would probably take a house's worth of power.
Yeah. Vega is it's just a funny architecture because it's got a really bad name for itself in the desktop market because it performs well. It's not bad, but it consumes a lot of power and produces a lot of heat. And it's though, Vega, when you don't have it clocked at 1750 megahertz, is actually a very solid architecture that performs very well. Okay, so you should stop moving things around.
I didn't move anything.
So recently, people have been leaving AMD and going to Intel. So this is something you wanted to mention. So Raja Koduri left. Jim Keller left AMD because he wasn't really working as an AMD employee. He's more like a contractor in a sense. He jumps job to job, so this was kind of fine. But Jim Keller went from AMD to Tesla, and now he's with Intel. Well, Chris Hook moved to Intel. So
for those that don't know, Chris Hook was their head marketing.
Yeah. He did a pretty good job. I think mostly I agreed with. I think their marketing was good. He's been with AMD for 20 years and left. So
they didn't have the 4 gig debacle like Nvidia did. So
that's true.
At least he saved them.
At least he saved them that. Yeah.
Now,
so 20 years he's been with them. These employees ain't loyal, is what I'm saying. But he has an interesting standpoint on this, so I want you to talk about this.
So there's kind of an unprecedented opportunity within the PC industry right now for people that know graphics cards and people that can market things.
Yeah.
Because how often does a major established company jump into essentially a new industry like this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
not common. We're talking about obviously Intel moving into GPUs. Yeah.
Yeah. Chris Hook is running the dedicated graphics marketing,
Which is what
which means that as long as the hardware isn't utter trash, it lives or dies on his marketing.
Yes.
This is a way that he can, like, if he wants to retire in 10 years, he can go out knowing, like, I was a god at marketing. This is this is a big creative opportunity. This is a big thing that, like, he's not going to get
It's an
anything
opportunity
like
that's
this
maybe
at
not
AMD.
just money for him, but maybe something that means something to him. And so, I mean...
It's these types of moves, like, there's a couple reasons people leave companies. Some people do it because money. Some people do it because they work for a bad company. And some people do it because they want an opportunity that's new and interesting to them.
Yeah, and that
when
maybe
you've been working
that's
at the
a good
same
point.
company for 20 years.
Yeah.
And when, especially on the marketing side, it's like the
might get
marketing
boring
is
at a
kind of
point.
set. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets boring at a point where it's like...
They're bringing him in to run graphics marketing. He has to do what he wants.
Yeah,
for the
right.
most
And he
part,
gets to do
but-
something completely new and different. And so I can understand that to a point. I do. And I mean, I can maybe understand Raja moving for the same reason. Although I think Raja had pretty good opportunities at AMD. The problem was he didn't... I believe, and this is just my standpoint, I believe he didn't think that they had enough money to do what he wanted. What I think, Raja, if you're listening,
First off, say hi, please.
Hi, yeah, please. I think that AMD now especially has plenty of money to dump into the GPU market to attempt to make it better. So you picked a very bad time to leave, you idiot. Second off, I never really liked you anyway. I really didn't. He bothered me all the time. I don't think he did a very good job as a graphic architect.
He bothered you all the time? Am I bothering you all
No,
the time?
you're not as much as Raja. And I don't think he did a very good job because he did a lot of the design standpoints, please stop, behind Vega. And as we know, Vega is a good architecture, but it also isn't that great for the desktop market because it doesn't scale well when you start increasing clock speeds drastically. So it's a great architecture and you did a great job on that standpoint, but I don't think your job was exactly to make an architecture that's only competitive on the low end. I don't think that's what AMD needed right now.
I mean, AMD needed money and market share. Where's the majority of the market? Laptops.
That's true, right. But Polaris is excellent in that area. Excellent. And Vega, we were hoping, would be their counter to the...
Intel liked Vega enough to throw in their chips.
Yeah, well, although there's a debate about that. Remember when we talked about that? It's kind of more like Polaris than Vega in the Kaby Lake G stuff. They're calling it Vega because it's newer and takes some stuff from it, but it's basically Polaris from the understanding of what the investigations that people and news outlets have been doing come to. But anyway, yeah, it's... I never really liked Raja, but maybe he'll do a good job for Intel. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Intel making dedicated graphics, it does make sense to have somebody that's maybe good at making something that is particularly power efficient and powerful at low clock speeds. So and I don't know exactly how much his engineering really even had to play in terms of AMD, though. I don't really know.
Yeah, we don't know the details.
We don't know.
It's all
we don't know.
speculation.
Like, we know Raja's an engineer, but we don't know how much he really put into it. Maybe he wasn't getting to do much himself. Maybe he was having to do what other people wanted. Taking a picture of a fly on our light. That's beautiful. Bugs. So, yeah. Anyway, this is interesting. And then Jim Keller makes sense because Jim Keller basically goes, whoever needs me to do something amazing, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what happens. I mean, he was with... I mean, Lisa Su, I was like, she might bring AMD back when she first took over as CEO. And then she hired Jim Keller, and I'm like, yeah, she's bringing AMD back. And then here we have Zen, thanks to Jim Keller and Lisa Su, that's pretty excellent, and Infinity Fabric, that's excellent. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of Jim's standpoint, as just, I'll go do something cool, and then I'll kind of chill for a while.
Speaking of pests, BlackBerry announced a new product.
Speaking of pests, great segue. Okay, I'm actually excited for this, and I'm going to buy it if it's as good as I think. Okay, so there was the BlackBerry Key 1, right? And that was a phone, and I had one, and I was very happy with it, other than I got one of the earlier units that had the screen that fell out easy, so I'm going to be repairing mine because my screen came out. But they fixed that. Yeah, I'm going to be super gluing it. Now, of course, they fixed that. They admitted there was a problem. They didn't attempt denial, and then they fixed it by putting the most adhesive anybody's ever put on a damn display.
They're the type of company that has to give a YouTuber their phone before they know if it's good enough to drop.
Okay, it was a manufacturing reason, though. It was a manufacturing problem where it wasn't all of the early units that had this problem. It was a lot of them, but it wasn't all of them. There was something wrong. Maybe the little kid squeezing the adhesive bottle didn't squeeze it hard enough.
Jesus Christ. Okay, but meanwhile, a random-ass Chinese camera manufacturing company delayed their products because they were able to catch minute specks of dust on very small amounts of their cameras.
Okay.
And not just did they catch it and delay it, they gave extra products because they felt bad.
Yes, I understand that. But BlackBerry here fixed it for everybody. Everybody that was like, hey, my phone has this problem, they're like, send it to us, we'll put more adhesive on it, we'll fix it for you.
They just grab the phone, rip the screen out, glue it.
Crack! And just... yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, point is, they fixed the issue.
But and then you're going to buy this at launch, and the Key 2 is going to have some other problem.
And that's what I hate. That actually what's made me so sad about the Key 1.
The key caps will fall off.
Right, exactly. And that's what made me sad.
Or Logitech will make the keycaps and they'll break.
And they'll just shatter, yeah. And that's what made me so sad about the Key 1, because that phone had so much potential because it was excellent. And I was happy with mine, and I gave it a pretty solid review. But with the screen falling off, that really ruined the idea in consumers' heads around it. And so even when it was fixed, it doesn't mean that, you know, their sales weren't as good as it could have been.
Like the boot loop.
Yeah, right. Yes, I hate you. So anyway, he's talking about LG, not BlackBerry. They haven't had boot loop problems like ever. No. But their software is actually incredibly solid. But yeah, I mean, other than being a little slow, yeah. Well, other than being a little slow though, the Key 1 was a very great phone, and I loved it. And I was sad that it didn't sell as well as it did, although it did help bring BlackBerry back in some ways. It did get good reviews. Well, here's the BlackBerry Key 2, getting to the point here as I run on and on and on. It's got bigger keys, and they're matte, so it's more similar looking to the BlackBerry Passport, which was a wonder to type on other than its stupid layout. It was actually a great phone to type on. I love typing on that. It, of course, wasn't running Android. I didn't own one. A friend of mine owned one that buys basically every BlackBerry device, and that was one of the best ones I personally think they ever produced. And BlackBerry 10 was a good OS, other than the fact that it just didn't have any apps for it realistically, and so wasn't competitive in the market. Now that it's running Android, I think it has more potential, and I liked the bigger form factor. I think bigger keys would make a big difference in terms of typing. So the specs weren't leaked, but basically my standpoint is, if the camera is at least decent, and the specs are at least decent, I will get it. Now, if the camera is complete trash and unusable, I'm going to stay away from it, because I do use my camera for my phone periodically. Obviously, I'll have a nicer phone that I'll take with me if I go like hiking or something with a big case on it, so that if it gets damaged or whatever, I don't have to worry about it. I'll have a better camera, like my S8, for example, has a case on it. I take that places.
And break it.
And I break it. I broke it before it had a case on it. But point is, that's my, like, you know, I take it to take pictures. So the camera doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm excited, and I'm hoping to buy one. I'm going to buy one if it satisfies those two requirements of decent specs and actually pretty solid camera.
And when he has an issue with it, I'll laugh.
You know? Yeah, that's fine. I might not buy it on launch. We'll see. Also, something else related to BlackBerry Key 2. Hi, Ethan. Hi. Okay. So you wanted to talk about this. This was interesting.
Yeah, so Google's like, hey, our podcast situation kind of sucks. Let's improve it. So they didn't come out with a podcast app. They integrated podcast into Google search.
Yeah.
So for Assistant, I can see how this would be.
I wanted to mention something. We have a comment. Somebody said your audio is about 0.3 of a second ahead of the video. We know about this issue. It seems to pop up whenever we start dropping frames, which seems to happen about once a video. We have bad frame dropping issues. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've had it about once or twice this video where they just dropped for like a few seconds. It throws our audio out of sync because the audio on this seems to be perfectly in sync, and from what I understand, Twitch audio tends to stay near perfect. So I apologize to all you viewers on YouTube. maybe go over to twitch.tv/WordTech and watch us over there because it's better quality over there anyway. So anyway, continue. Yeah, so we have Google Pod. Yeah, this is weird.
So they might come out with a dedicated podcast app later, and I presume that they will. They just haven't said anything yet. But as of right now, they're essentially building in the podcasting, essentially like a web app, into their search platform. So if you want to search for a podcast, you can search for it, and you can start playback. If you pause playback and open up on another device and search for that podcast, you can resume playback from that spot. It's got like a fully feature-built podcasting thing tied to your account, just not accessible from a dedicated app or platform, only the search.
I find that so weird, because shouldn't the app come first?
You would think that.
I just find that really odd, honestly.
I think what happened was they were building something out for Assistant first. I think that they were like just building something for Assistant. We're like,
that could be.
And someone was like, hey guys, I have a crazy idea. What if we supported phones?
Google's decision making.
Nothing makes sense.
I love Google as a company on the standpoint that they do let their employees express their ideas.
Too much.
But guys, sometimes there's ideas that don't need to be expressed.
I think that they needed to do podcasts differently. I just think they did it in a weird order.
So let me give you an interesting example of an idea. So we have Google Plus, right? And
that did not need to be expressed.
No, that I think needed to be expressed. I think it failed for a plethora of reasons. Although I use it all the time still. I love Google Plus. But anyway, I hate you. So anyway, the point I want to make about Google Plus isn't Google Plus as a whole. I actually want to talk about a specific aspect of Google Plus. So it was set up in Google Plus, and they fixed this since. But it was set up in Google Plus that when you went into a thread of comments, right? So when you want to @ somebody on Google Plus, it's the plus symbol. So you do plus and you start typing their name, right? So say you're in a comment thread and there's Steve and Joe and Chloe or whatever, right? And you want to tag one of them in a comment, right? So the way that you used to be able to do it, and you can now again, but you would start typing in your comment and then you would do plus, and then you would start typing their name. And instead of finding the first result for, say, Steve in your groups, the first result would be the Steve that's in this thread. And it was especially useful when people have names using characters that aren't really used in English, right? So there's some people accents and stuff that aren't used in English, where they have symbols and stuff above the letters, right? Where it was like really hard to actually spell their name properly to find them, but it would find them because you just type the first letter or two, and then you're good to go. So this is a great example of them expressing an idea. They literally removed that feature, so in order to tag people, you had to click reply on their comments specifically. Now, they added that back, but it was like, whose bright idea was, let's just remove this feature that actually makes something useful? Or just like you used to say with circles. Circles was an awesome idea, and then they basically shoved it behind a bunch of walls, and now they have an option to bring it back. There's now an option where you can organize your feed by circles, but they removed that completely, which is one of the only unique features about it, and then they brought it back.
So when they first removed it, you still had it, like on Android. It was just buried in the settings, and it wasn't available at all on iOS, because the settings on Android and the settings on iOS are completely different. The settings on iOS were not app settings. It was the account and web settings.
Right. It's so weird. It's just
it was
so weird.
Utterly moronic.
Oh, man.
Podcasts just makes no sense.
I don't know. Google
when they have the dedicated app out, I'll be happy to use it. But as of right now on Android, use Pocket Casts. It's worth the money.
I don't get this. Although I'd like to get our podcast on Pocket Cast.
Then do it.
That's a goal at some point. It's not free. Is it?
Pocket Casts?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Is it? I thought
you have to find hosting, which is why I sent you that link to Anchor.
Oh, because Anchor does free hosting, right?
Anchor automatically puts it on all the platforms for you.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I need to set that up. I need to set that up because we want this available on as many platforms as possible except Facebook. Yeah. Speaking of which, I should mention very briefly.
Let's wait till we get to the Facebook topics, let's wait till we get to the Facebook topic. I want to go to bed.
Okay. Hey, we're only a half hour over time
so far.
Okay.
Comcast is doing some janky stuff with speed increases, so let's talk about this.
Wow, Comcast is doing janky stuff with speeds?
I'm not as mad about this as a lot of other people because I want to explain why. Like, I've seen people, like, saying, like, you know, oh, with net neutrality, we wouldn't have this. Barnacles was going off on it on Twitter. Dude, companies, ISPs have been offering...
You're tapping the table
okay.
a lot.
I don't care. ISPs have been offering things like speed increases as part of bundles forever.
Okay.
And I don't think that's unreasonable.
So I have a little bit of a different standpoint, because it's not a speed increase because of a bundle.
As long as the speed is available, which it is, all of these speeds that are currently listed are also available. Okay. Realistically, you're getting them for a better price because of the bundle.
That's true.
That's
but what I find
if you
kind of BS is they're giving you the speed increase without you doing anything, right? So that you don't even have to be notified. You just all of a sudden have faster speeds if you're on this plan, but not on the other plan.
Yes.
And so you can upgrade on the other plan if you want, and I do kind of understand that, but it's frustrating to me because...
They're essentially improving the bundle and not the regular speed because they're improving the bundle. I do understand the complaint that, like, they're trying to force you on a TV.
Yeah.
But they've always done that. Why is this such a big deal now?
It's always been an issue. Yeah.
Just because net neutrality is an issue now doesn't mean that every single thing that happens with internet is as big of a deal as people make it out to be.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a problem with bundled pricing, that's one thing. Then you have every reason to be mad at this because this is bundled pricing. Yeah. But ultimately, this is not as big of a deal.
It's not a huge issue. It's just it's kind of shady. That's the thing. It's Comcast, and I mean, at this point,
I hate Comcast as much as the next. I don't see how this is shady.
You should stop defending Comcast, or you're never allowed on this podcast again.
I'm going to bed.
I'm just kidding.
Now, that being said, I want to share the pricing for this because this will affect some people.
Yes.
So this pricing is going to be for the Oregon and Southwest Washington region, and then I'll pull up the other region in a second because they're also doing it in, I think it's Houston. In Oregon and Southwest Washington, what it's doing, now you'll want to look up these details to see if your bundle would be applicable. I'm not going to go through that. But if your bundle is, then the 60 megabits plan goes up to the 150 megabit bundle. The 150 goes up to 250, and then the 250 either goes up to 400 or 1 gig, depending on your bundle.
Yeah.
So they're not even getting, like, all bundles the same. Also, a lot of the ads that were like, oh, yeah, if you have cable, you get better speed. That's only applicable if you're on the 60. If you're on anything above the 60, you have to have cable and phone.
Yeah, right.
Or if you want the gig, you have to have cable, phone,
so they're making their bundles better.
You have to have cable, phone,
that.
and I think it's either cell phone or security to be in the
Okay, and you know what? Also, I guess I hate to do it, but we can give them credit for the fact that they didn't pull the BS that they pulled before, where they go, oh, you're on contract, so even though the new one is the same price and has better speeds and more stuff, you don't get that. Yeah. Because you're on a contract, so you still have to pay the same amount that new people pay.
And the majority of the people on bundles are on contracts, especially because, like, that's
so this doesn't screw the contract people, and I can appreciate that because it is really annoying when you run into that moment where it's like, oh, we're paying $150 a month for just say, for example, 100 megabits. Let's say it's synchronous, 100 megabits up and down, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's the same price for 250 up and down, and it's like, oh, well, we can't upgrade to that. You're on a contract. You have to do whatever we say. So
I also like how like the actual like official press release that was put out via NASDAQ for this. It's saying, like, they'll be receiving speed boosts of 30 to 40%. Literally only one plan is not over 100% speed increase. Yeah. I was like, what?
That's kind of weird.
Like, the 150 to 250...
Okay, maybe if they're talking about upload. Maybe that's where they pulled that BS number from.
Upload's not going up.
Yeah, probably not.
150 to 250 is the only thing that's not over 100% increase.
Yeah. So Ruru2 made a couple of fun comments here that I wanted to mention on really quick. He says, when am I getting Google Fiber? Probably never, because Google is not rolling out fiber at all right now. They might get back into it in the future. Google Fiber still exists as like a business, but they're not pushing things out. Part of that might be because they're waiting to see if the 80 gigahertz wireless technology that is line of sight going from like house to a tower in the central neighborhood is a more efficient way to do that. Part of it is they've had too much pushback from government that is obviously paid, or most of the time paid by the big ISPs as well as the big ISPs themselves, and other laws that haven't passed. It's made it really hard for Google to properly roll out fiber, so it's going to be a while before you get that, which is really unfortunate because also they had plans to roll it out to Portland here, and I was like, I'll buy it. And then they didn't, and then CenturyLink is still promising that they're going to roll out fiber to my neighborhood. They have in Portland, a lot of Portland, And if they do, I'm buying it from them, even though they're not much better than Comcast as a company.
Yeah. Also, though, one other thing that I heard that affected Google's fiber stuff. The cost of customer service was higher than the executives of the fiber portion were okay with.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess.
And presumably that means stockholders were complaining about it.
Stockholders were complaining.
Yeah.
And then they were also...
Having known a little bit about how some of the Google customer service sites work, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
It's literally some of the customer service sites, I don't know if they're still doing this, but for a while, you got a bonus for showing up on time.
Yeah.
Like that was your only bonus. Was whether or not you showed up at the time you were required to show up. And it was a good bonus. And their pay was already good.
That's just weird.
I thought about moving to Seattle to go work at that site.
Yeah, that's just... Oh, man. I hope we get fiber here at some point, though. I would love synchronous fiber. That would be the most beautiful thing ever, because I hate waiting 6 hours for a video to upload.
While not at apartments, you should look and see if Frontier's in your area, because Frontier does have synchronous...
They're not.
Okay.
Or at least their good service isn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked into it once. Maybe I should look again. That was a while ago. I should look again. Because I just want better service here. In particular, Upload. Our Upload's 15. We're on Comcast Business. This is horrible. Also, Ruru2 made a really funny comment. Comcast turned Captain America into a Hydra agent.
No, that was Disney.
That was Disney. Hey! I mean, they're both monopolies.
Are they, though?
Oligopolies, I'm sorry.
So, let's talk about the Fate keynote. I don't know why they call it F8. It's a really dumb name for a keynote. Facebook had a keynote. I don't care about most of the stuff. I don't really care about most any of it. But we'll talk about two things. They made a dating app. Don't use it. If you are wanting like a Facebook connected one, use Tinder.
Hashtag delete Facebook.
If you want a good one, use Bumble or anything else.
Just match eHarmony, something.
Yeah.
Not this. It's just like, it's just frustrating, and it's like Facebook's just so horrible, and it's like, can you improve your baseline service and your baseline data security before doing new ventures?
The other concern with this, the dating app has been talked about and in the works for a while, which means it's not being built with the pressure of the security concerns right now in mind. If this was like something they started now, that would be one thing, because everything is going to be different because of how much pressure they're under.
Yep.
But this is like same old Facebook type thing.
It is, yeah, it is. And, speaking of which, to mention here, before we move on to the next part of the Facebook topic, I'm deleting my Facebook account, which means I won't even be managing the WordTech Facebook account anymore, and we will not be uploading all of our content to the Facebook account there, the Facebook video account there, even though I'd like to be able to upload to multiple areas for all of our content. That's not going to be one of them anymore, because I'm done with it. I'm deleting. I'm not deactivating. I'm deleting. I'm just getting rid of it. There's no point. Come Monday, I'm done. And it's like, people should be deleting Facebook. And I've gotten a lot of people telling me, like, well, why are you getting rid of Facebook, but you're okay with Google or Twitter or whatever having your data, which realistically Google definitely, and probably Microsoft and a few other companies, have more information about me than Facebook. It's because those companies do shady crap with their data, but at least we generally know that they only do shady crap with their data when they know they're doing shady crap with the data. Facebook did shady crap with the data, and they had no idea shady crap was going on with their data.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They have control over it still, even though they do crappy stuff with it.
And on top of that, do you really think that if Google, found out a company was gathering data without their consent, that they wouldn't, have people at the site to verify deletion?
I mean, not only would they have people at the site to verify deletion,
Yo, guys,
afterwards,
just tell us it was done.
Google would drop their lawyer hammer. I mean, we've seen their lawyers work. They basically don't lose, except when they go up against the EU.
Google would buy the company so that they can make sure that they have all the data back.
Yeah. This is what, but Facebook basically we can just effectively say no action.
Yes.
Right? And the thing here is, that's the understanding. I want people to get why deleting Facebook is a good idea. It's not because they have your data and that's a privacy concern. It's the fact that they don't have control over the data they have on people. Whereas these other companies that sell your data to places, even like Cambridge Analytica, for example, they at least know that they're selling this data to these companies and that they're giving this data to these companies.
On top of that, when does... I mean, obviously, I guess it could have happened, but, we don't have any actual indication or even rumors about this. But when has Google manipulated users to see if they can affect their emotional response to
Exactly.
posts?
Shady
Facebook has
crap like
done
that.
that.
Yeah.
Not just like we think that, like they've confirmed it.
Well, and other equally shady crap
Mm-hmm.
that they've done to people.
Yeah.
That's not cool. And obviously the site's also just full of garbage. It was the point where I was like, I hate using
Yeah.
this service. I'm done. So I'd probably get rid of my Facebook. I was off it for 5 years. I started again, gave it a year, and I'm like, no. Once again, it's been
Yeah.
almost exactly a year, and I'm like, even if this hadn't happened, I'd be like, I'm just going to deactivate it. There's no point. Because I'd be like, it's just boring, and it's full of garbage, and it's just designed to be addictive. And to somebody like me that knows it's designed to be addictive, I go, yeah, this is all garbage. It's designed to be addictive. I'm out. And it's just, it's just so frustrating.
I feel like from every other service, I get more meaningful content anyway.
I think so, too. Even Google Plus.
Yeah. Even just from a pure content standpoint. It's
Yes.
just like, what's the point of Facebook?
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like Facebook is like just how you see how your 14-year-old or your friends from, when you were 14 are like living their life. What do you do? If you're friends with them, you'll find out anyway.
Yeah,
If you're
right,
not, then
right.
it's seeing
And
stuff
also,
you don't care
Rumor
about.
2 made the point, Facebook's main revenue stream is selling data to ad companies.
That
And
is not true.
So, is it not?
No, Facebook doesn't sell data. Because
Oh.
if they sold your data, other companies could use it.
Because they have
That's
their own ad
That's what's
service.
even
They have
worse
their
about
own ad
letting
ser-
Cambridge
yeah.
Analytica get that data. Facebook doesn't even care about their own business practice because Facebook ultimately sells, like, they're an ad
Or they're
network.
just too lazy to hire anybody to realize that this kind of crap was going on.
No, they knew about it.
They
and
knew
didn't care.
about it. That's true.
But
yeah.
Facebook, essentially what Facebook and what like Google does with your data, what most of these companies do is that have their own ad network, at least like Facebook and Google, is they don't use your data to sell. They do use your data to profit, but by saying that we have data on these users, so they have like essentially they like make users into different tiers based on how much data they have. The more data they have, the more targeted ads
They're
they can
their
do on
own
you.
ad company in that
The
sense.
higher they can charge for those ads.
Yeah, right.
Because they
right.
know that they're more likely to work.
Because
There's a
they're
higher
targeted.
percentage chance, so they can charge more.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So, I mean, I guess his statement in a sense is still true because they're not selling to ad companies. They are the ad company.
Yeah.
But they're profiting in that same kind
They are
of realm.
profiting off your data, not selling your data.
Correct. Yeah. So they're using your data
But
to
I
profit.
think that's an important
But-
distinction to make.
I think so too. And I mean, I think though a lot of it does come down to people need to have the understanding that Facebook does not have control over anything that happened, and they've admitted that there's going to be more announcements about more data problems, and this is an issue that is really persistently problematic with them, and this is why I think people should just get rid of everything from Facebook, maybe Instagram.
On top
We're
of
still in
that,
debate on that.
As much as I have problems with public companies, Facebook being the structure that they are of, while technically public, not really because Zuckerberg owns more than 50% of the stock, they're in a weird situation where Facebook is, especially because it is solely a social media service, it is arguably more powerful than a lot of small countries,
Yes.
yet there is absolutely no accountability.
No, not at all.
There's
Yeah.
no, literally, if every stockholder got together besides Zuckerberg and wanted Zuckerberg out,
It wouldn't happen.
it can't happen.
It literally can't happen.
It literally comes down to if Mark Zuckerberg wants to quit or not.
Yeah, if he wants to do anything in Facebook, he can.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. And that's a frustrating standpoint because you have one man who's an idiot and an asshole
Mm.
in power of a company that is hugely powerful, and then they don't have control over their data. And as I was saying about Google earlier, whereas like if something like this happened to Google or even a lot of other companies, but Google is known, like they take their army of lawyers and they just clobber you if
Yeah.
necessary. And they would do the same thing. An example of like Cambridge Analytica, I'm sure there'd be a buttload of legal action that would come out of Google's side, not just the government's side, against them
Yeah.
for what they've done. Because this was a breach of contract. I mean, Facebook could shut down Cambridge Analytica for this, but we have no reports of them doing any legal action against them.
No. I
Because
mean,
they don't
Cambridge
care.
Analytica did shut
I mean,
down.
it did shut down, but it wasn't Facebook suing them that did
No.
it. Yeah. Now, who knows? It could be an internal threat of suit, but doesn't matter. Because,
Realistically, it's they wanted to avoid legal action in the U.S., so they shut down.
yeah.
But they're like a couple months ago, the like a few people on the board made a new company.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's
yeah,
literally
so
going to be
it's
they do the same thing, but you can't hold the company itself accountable financially.
Yep.
And it's not like they're going to jail them.
And also, if you file like bankruptcy, for example, as a company, like that's all void, and you can start a new business, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's people that do that as scams. They take a business, they profit as much as they can personally from it, they bankrupt it, but keep their own personal money, and then they start a new company or buy a new company.
Also on this topic, because in the U.S., Mark Zuckerberg can be forced to testify in front of Congress because he's a U.S. citizen.
Yes.
He cannot in the U.K. be forced because he's not in the U.K. currently.
Yeah.
However, the U.K. is doing what they can to try and force it. They have given him an ultimatum. He either agrees to set a date to come in person and testify,
Yeah.
or they set a summons so that as soon as he enters the UK, if he ever goes there again, he will be forced to testify.
Yeah.
If they have to arrest him and bring him to Parliament, they will.
Yep.
So we'll see how that goes.
We'll see how that all goes. Fun stuff. Is that
Yeah.
it?
The Oculus Go was released. It's a standalone
Oh.
VR headset. It seems pretty cool. I want to test it, but I like the idea of decent standalone headsets, not ones you stick your phone into, because there's a lot of problems with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues
So,
in that direction.
I like standalone headsets, and honestly, I like my Oculus. So I think the Oculus Go will probably be a pretty good product.
Hashtag support Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's everything we got for you guys today. We went over by 40 minutes, so you're welcome because we started an hour late. So actually, we should be saying sorry, not you're welcome. But
no, we just used the old time slot.
we just used the old time slot. Yeah,
Yeah.
9 to 11 instead of 8 to 10. Now, there's going to be a lot of adjustments happening with the with the business and the company here soon, and with the channel. So I want you guys to keep in mind, I'm going to talk about it all in detail with a channel update video that I'll be releasing soon. Hopefully, I think tomorrow, but I'm not entirely sure yet. It depends on when it's ready. But we're going to be doing a whole bunch of restructuring, as I mentioned towards the beginning. I want to mention here at the end again as well. Restructuring in terms of when videos releases. We're also going to be restructuring the podcast. We're going to be restructuring animations so that we can actually have proper intros to things, and hopefully get some guests on the podcast. We may be doing a new time slot for the podcast that makes more sense because, frankly, running a mostly PC hardware, but also, of course, we cover a lot of other tech news, but mostly PC hardware related channel podcast, doing that shortly after PC Perspective, who's huge in the industry and awesome. I love those guys. Nothing against them, but it's probably not the best idea on our front because it's like everybody's already heard a lot of the PC news that's been talked about, so we're not bringing anything new to the table. We're just regurgitating. So we want to try and do it at a different time slot, a different day is the goal, as well as a time slot that makes more sense for people that aren't Pacific time, because a lot of people that are in the rest of the U.S. and aren't here in Pacific time zone, it's bedtime by the time we start the podcast or close to it, and so they're asleep going to work, and we do it on a weekday. Doesn't make sense.
So I will also respond to the Oculus's Facebook. They got you again. While true, as with most any hardware like consoles and VR headsets and stuff, the money doesn't come from the sale of the hardware. They might make a little bit, but the money comes from the software. I buy all my apps through Steam.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Especially now that devs...
So we'll have to see where the apps on this come from.
Especially now that devs... Well, with the Oculus Go, it's going to be the Oculus Marketplace.
Right,
you can't
true, yeah. And Ruru, too, also said, time to go watch Level 1 News. Yeah, those guys are awesome, too. I listen to them every time. They're excellent, so go watch them.
But, yeah, so, like, especially now that devs are really understanding that people want to use Steam, because the problem initially was that a lot of... Steam apps or Steam games that supported the Oculus were not built under the Oculus's SDK, and so there was a lot of problems with that.
Yeah.
They just didn't run that well. But now you can get apps on Steam that run properly.
Which is good. Good on them. So I think that's it we have for you guys today, though. So I guess we're signing off.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys, should be next week. I don't know when we're changing the time slot yet. Oh my. I don't know when we're changing the time slot and day yet, so of course we'll make a bunch of announcements about that when it happens. But we should be back in a week on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Usually we start late, so keep that in mind. All right, I think that's it. I'm going to click stop.